So today in Growing Places, we are talking about plant-based proteins. Joining us to discuss why you can't grow pigs on Mars, how to make your own tempeh, and the future of plant-based proteins is the founder of Tofurky. Welcome to the channel, Seth Tibbott.
Thanks. Hey, great to be here.
As you know, we've titled this section, Why You Can't Grow Pigs on Mars, or Why You Can't Raise Pigs on Mars. Now, really what we're talking about here is kind of food system efficiency and looking at what our food system might look like if we were to start with a blank sheet of paper. And the Mars example is really just an interesting kind of thought experiment about what, the alternative food system that we might imagine. So, Seth, let's start off. What I wanted to ask you is why is it so impractical to entertain the idea of actually growing or raising pigs on Mars?
So, growing food on Mars is going to have certainly a unique set of challenges, but the biggest challenge is you are going to have to be so efficient with whatever it is that you grow that you can't afford, 15 to 1, 5 to 1 ratio. You can't grow 5 times as many plants as you need in order to feed them through an animal to come out with half a pound or a pound of protein. That's just not going to work, especially in the early years. But, the system on Earth only works because we have this false image that we have so much land on the planet that we can afford to be inefficient in the way we raise food. And that just isn't the case on Mars. I think you're going to have to look down at the lowest greenhouse gas emissions and most efficient uses of water and nutrients that you can. And people are going to have to, on the one hand, eat, I think, plants directly. But on the other hand, this whole clean meat sort of idea where they're growing meat in a lab, for instance, chicken takes 6 weeks to grow chickens to slaughter weight. I mean, that's a terrible sort of figure to have in your mind, that only 6 weeks of life for a chicken. But then you look at growing the chicken meat in this microbrewery, as you were, would be 6 days. So anytime you get that kind of efficiency, I think that it's something to really look into. And I think that maybe those will be the two ways that you'll get protein will be one, growing it in a laboratory, and two would be getting food and nutrients directly from plants. I have a couple of slides here that I wanted to point out that talk about the kilograms of CO2 equivalents that are produced by all the different forms of proteins, everything from beef and lamb, which are at the very top of the chart here, as you can see. And I think the beef is like around 49 kilograms greenhouse gases that are produced per 100 grams of protein. And you look down in the bottom to the lower proteins, and there you have the legumes, you have tofu, you have lentils, and products like that. Tofu, if you'll notice down there, is only 2 kilograms per 100 grams of CO2. So that is sort of a 25 to 1 ratio. And then when you get down to turkey and poultry, you're down to, I think, a more like 10 or 15 kilograms. So the factor is more like 5 to 10 on the poultry end of things. So that's one ratio that you can look at.
It's certainly, I guess, affirming and supports some of the things that we like to promote here at Urban Leaf as well, which is that we live in this day and age of heightened environmental consciousness and awareness. And I mean, you've been watching this space for a long time, Seth. You'd know better than me. But it seems that, like, if you ask the average person, how do you become an environmentalist, or what are you doing to live a greener life? They'll talk about solar panels, electric cars. Maybe they got a Tesla, or maybe they even, refer to their recycling and reusable shopping bags. But we all have a fork. Well, most of us use a fork to eat several times a day. And it seems to me that there really isn't any decision or single thing that we do today where we can have the potential to have a greater impact as what we decide to eat. And certainly this data you've shared with us just now really, really brings that point home.
That's a great point, Nate. I mean, the fork may be the most dangerous tool that we have. And, what we put in our mouth now and what we're going to put in our mouth in the future is going to really say a lot about how livable the planet is for our children and our grandchildren. So we really need to cut back, especially there's another chart here I'd like to show that shows what they call the high end consumer, which is, the US people. And, that if we cut down our consumption of meat and dairy by 40%, the impact would be huge. I think it's 160 megatons of greenhouse gases or something. So it's really quite stark. You'd be a vegan or a vegetarian, great. But if you can just cut back on your meat and dairy too, it's going to help so much.
Yeah.
And there's no reason now to not cut back, because honestly, the taste and the texture of these plant-based milks and plant-based meats, cheese, yogurt, everything's getting so much better now. The joke in the 1990s that we used to say about when plant-based cheese first came out would be like, hey, did you hear about the fire in the vegan cheese factory? Cheese still didn't melt. The next day it was perfect. Everything else burned, but the cheese didn't. Now it melts and it's getting better, but it's really, cheese from animals has been around for centuries and thousands of years. And here people bag on vegan cheese like, it's just not good enough. And, it's still a ways to go, but it's a lot better. We just came out with some cheese that I think is great. I'm going to make a grilled cheese sandwich for lunch here after I get finished with this. So it's getting better, but there's still some.
Jealous. I'd love a.
Can you give us a couple of 100 years before you really start critiquing?
Seth, let's assume for a moment that you have been assigned as the chief architect of the food system on Mars. You have this blank sheet of paper and you're starting from scratch. Could you talk us through, just at a high conceptual level, what that food system might look like? And are there kind of any key features or attributes to it that you think would be really, really important?
So the foods that we are going to have on Mars are all going to have to be ultra efficient, and they're going to have to be fast growing, and they're going to have to deliver a lot of protein and nutrients for their punch. So I think that foods like greens, which are packed with so many vitamins and minerals, lettuce, arugula, plants like that, and that'll grow pretty fast. And we won't be feeding them through animals, so we'll just be eating them ourselves. And getting back to the original point that I built my whole business around in 1980, which was the efficiency of feeding grains and beans directly to people instead of running them through animals, is going to be the other key component there. We have to look at the very best bang for the buck plants that are in there, which is, your beans and lentils and peas. We're not going to have probably big fields of grains anytime soon, so that might be a problem. But, we can grow a lot of beans and lentils in a small space. That and I think the cellular meat kind of things and other things that we'll be able to grow inside the lab will have great effect too.
And we've been obviously talking about Mars as kind of a thought experiment example. I mean, it might one day be true, but are the concepts that we're talking about here in terms of resource efficiency, are they equally applicable to Earth as they would be on Mars?
Yeah, they exactly are, and especially now. But even more so, 2050 is like 30 years away right now. And when you look at feeding 10 billion people, there just doesn't seem to be any other way to do it than to create more efficiencies of scale. Also, when you look at 100 years out, there just doesn't seem to be any way that I can fathom that we would be able to do this sort of inefficient system like we have right now. So I think that our weakness is going to be exposed as we go forward. And we're basically propping up a inefficient system that really shouldn't be propped up.